Now if you would, imagine the year is 2014. The second American-made Godzilla movie is hitting theaters after the atrocity that was Godzilla 1998. And naturally, toys were coming out left, right, and center. Most of them were kiddie garbage, don't get me wrong, but there was a shining knight amongst all of them. That knight brought American-made Godzilla figures with pretty good articulation to the mass markets. Basically a cheaper American-made alternative to the line SH Monster Arts, but without the character variety. And at a far cheaper price point. And the knight that made this toy line was NECA. In their tenure, they made Monsterverse figures, Heisei figures, and even Showa figures. Sadly though, there wasn't any other character besides Godzilla. And in 2020, fans were in for a very rude awakening. NECA was losing the license to make Godzilla figures. The last two figures of the line would come out in early summer, late spring of 2020. And one of those figures is today's subject, Godzilla 1989, also known as Bio-Goji. Now, as the year and name might suggest, this figure is from Godzilla vs. Biollante, which is widely renowned by many G fans to be one of the best in the franchise. But despite being from a specific movie, his outline is basic Heisei Godzilla. His bulldog-like snout, his big, thick chicken leg-like thighs, his fat, long dorsal plates, and his long, slender tail leave you with no mistake. This is the Godzilla of the 90s. Not you. The mix of the sheer chonk of this design and the nice dense plastic NECA used really makes it feel very hefty and well worth it. Thankfully though, not all of his plastic is heavy and dense. The spines are made of a nice rubbery material, so you're not going to stab yourself, or if you drop them, they're not going to snap. NECA usually gets a lot of shit for their figures being kind of fragile, and I've had a fair few NECA break on me, but this guy, he feels way different. Now I wouldn't go throwing him off the roof of your house, but he can take a lot of damage. And looking at him, you might not think that he can move that well. With it being NECA and a Heisei Godzilla with the chunkiness, he doesn't look that mobile. But it is possible to get him into some very dynamic poses. What helps with that is the joints being very nice and tight. But they're not typical NECA tight joints. They're surprisingly smooth. Besides the incredibly loud squeaking. It's kinda concerning. But those squeaky joints have been squeaky since I first got this thing 3 years ago. It's hard to complain about them when, over that span of time, none of them have gotten loose. He has jaw articulation, finger articulation, and the tail has a hell of a lot of... Oh, yes, all the joints are still nice and tight, but tightness doesn't help when the person who bought the figure is a gigantic moron. Instead of just being a normal collector and responsible, I dremeled the shit out of the tail to get it on. And sadly in that process, I made the tail very easy to pop off. It can still hold his weight, it's just not very good. If you're confused as to why I did that, it's because this part of the tail came separate in the package. Now I've gone over articulation and basic silhouette detail, but what about his real up-close detail? Now when you really study this figure, it looks very good. His skin tone is a nice grayish green, which actually might be a callback to the old Trendmaster toys. And all of his spines are very nicely painted with a bone color. Not only that, but the white fades perfectly into the skin tone, which is incredibly accurate. Not to mention the intricate sculpt on the dorsal plates, which carries over to the figure very, very well. He is utterly covered in detail, from the tip of his tail to the end of his snout, and all over him is a very nice black wash to really get the detail to pop. Both his finger and toenails have it, the dorsal plates have it, and the whole inside of his mouth has it. While on the subject of his face, let's talk about the eyes. I really love the sculpt here, but it's too human. I definitely don't remember him having brown eyes in the movie. I will say they did a nice job with the paint, very glossy and lifelike. But they did use a lot of red on the eyes, so he looks kinda stoned. And while this is very much a NECA style figure, he still fits in with other lines. The only real problem with this is that he's just too tall. And I know that complaining about a NECA figure being too tall is like ordering a large drink and receiving a large drink, but it just sucks because NECA never made any other kaiju, besides Monsterverse Rodan and Mothra, but they don't really fit with this guy. And you'd think the NECA Kong would fit with Godzilla, but he's too tall. Really sad that NECA never gave us any other Godzilla kaiju. Not even a Mecha Godzilla or a King Ghidorah. It definitely would have been preferred, especially because this guy comes with an atomic breath piece. The painting and sculpting on this thing is very nice. It's cast in white, but the blue really makes it pop. All the sculpt work is very nice and very detailed, and it leads to... That's a penis. That is straight up just a penis. It's a long point at the beginning of the beam with the bottom jaw sculpted in. So what you do is just shove that in his mouth and voila! I will say NECA's atomic breath pieces up until this point were pretty iffy, and this one surprisingly looks very, very good. Despite it being just a chunk of plastic, it doesn't weigh his head down at all. And it makes for an awesome look on your shelf. At the end of the day, it's just a really nice accessory to have with this very amazing figure. But it is quite large. And as I wrap this video up, I just sit back and think how lucky we were to get posable Godzilla figures stateside. Even if the line was just all Godzillas. I know that the NECA Godzilla figures have been off store shelves for over 2 years at this point, and this guy's original Deep Ogre review is almost 3 years old, but I really felt like I needed to do real justice by this figure, and not make the video 18 minutes of me blammering on about nonsense. Especially because this is one of NECA's last hurrahs in their short stint of Godzilla figures. So, I dedicate this video to NECA. They are definitely a worthy footnote in a franchise that's been going on for almost 70 years. Long live the Godzilla line that was only good for 2 years.